Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to go ahead and just get started with the easy question, which is what do you think the top stories coming out of your office are for this year?
Well, my top priority at the Department of Justice is public safety, and we've made progress on some significant issues. We have a lot more progress to make, but we've made a lot of progress. At DOJ, we investigate and prosecute some of the most serious types of crimes in Wisconsin, and I'm really proud of the work that we do on those issues. That includes things like drug trafficking or homicides and other very serious offenses. I also advocated for additional funding in the state budget for crime victim services, and while there wasn't as much included as I asked for, there was $20 million plus additional funding for CACs, $4 million for those child advocacy centers. So it's good to see some investment in victim services. Our Office of School Safety continued to do important work to help make schools in Wisconsin as safe as possible. And then we also recently talked about the Overdose Death Initiative, which was launched in 2024, where we have investigators working in collaboration with others, both local and federal officials, county and federal officials, to ensure that when there's an overdose death, that there's a full and thorough investigation.
I just want to quickly jump in and ask about this budget here because we saw the state crime lab report just come out earlier this month, and one of the things you mentioned in that was the lack of the 19 positions. Talk to me a little bit about what it means to not have those positions.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have not had the kind of investment in our crime labs that we have repeatedly called for. The good news is we've made some significant enhancements to the labs over the years. There's a new Milwaukee crime lab being built. DNA testing now uses what's called probabilistic genotyping, which means we can get matches in more cases. Toxicology testing, because of the use of LC-MS technology, can identify more types of drugs and drugs at lower quantities. But we haven't had investment from the legislature. So in the last budget, we asked for 19 positions for the labs. There were 0 that were provided. Having those resources helps ensure that the labs are operating efficiently and can help cut down turnaround times.
And are you talking with the legislature about getting that into the next budget already?
We've requested additional positions for the labs. Every budget I've submitted a request for. So the 25 to 27 budget was the 19 request, but in the 23 to 25 budget, we requested 16 positions and only got 3, none of which were for DNA analysis. So we continue to raise this issue with the legislature. I have continued to call on them to invest in the labs, and it's my hope that in the next budget they'll reassess and make the kinds of investments we're calling for.
And I want to move now to some federal topics because you've been a part of dozens of lawsuits against the Trump administration. And I want to ask, overall, do you think that this has been successful?
It has been. We've been winning case after case, and so we've gotten a lot of favorable rulings from courts. The Trump administration, in some cases, has also backed down, but the impact has been really significant. There are hundreds of millions of dollars in one-time funding that's at stake in these cases that has been preserved because of these actions or because the Trump administration has backed down. There's even more money at stake that unlawful conditions have been attached to. And I'll give you a simple example. Over the summer, the Trump administration tried to withhold significant funding for schools, including tens of millions of dollars for Wisconsin schools. That would have impacted important programs, and it would have created chaos in schools that had already budgeted for the year. We brought a legal action. Some members of Congress wrote to the administration, and ultimately they backed down. So that's an example of how we have really stabilized in response to the chaos and uncertainty that the administration has been causing.
Do you feel like there's been retaliation from the administration?
You know, there has been in other places. I don't think we have seen that in Wisconsin, fortunately. But certainly they have targeted people who they view as against them. So my colleague in New York, Tish James, for example, has been targeted by this administration. James Comey has been targeted by this administration. And we've seen some really concerning actions from the administration that are not targeted to Wisconsin, but that would harm Wisconsinites. So there was an effort during the government shutdown, for example, to stop providing funding for SNAP, even though the government had money that not only could be provided, but that legally was required to be provided. And so there were some statements that the administration made around that issue. But ultimately, protecting the interests of Wisconsinites, protecting our freedoms is what we do at the Department of Justice, and we're committed to doing that when we're needed to.
So is this risk of retaliation, is it worth it?
I don't think, like I said, I don't think that the administration has targeted Wisconsin specifically, but ultimately we've got to stand up for the rule of law, we've got to stand up for our freedoms, and we've got to stand up for critical programs, whether it's AmeriCorps or funding for schools or funding for medical research. Just last week we received an order in a case where the administration is trying to cut disaster mitigation funds, which would leave communities in Wisconsin less able to prepare for disasters. We can't just let the administration violate the law and decimate these critical programs.
Is this a sustainable route for the next 3+ years of the Trump administration?
It's my hope that the administration is going to see order after order ruling against it and say, we want to follow the law. We don't want to keep violating the law. We don't want courts to continue to find that what we're doing is impermissible. That hasn't been the approach that the administration has taken so far, but ultimately that's a call for our executive branch and the federal government to make. Now, what we do need is for partners to step up as well. I'm proud of the progress we've made in restoring order in response to the chaos of this administration, but we need Congress to step up as well and to ensure that it is taking steps to keep the administration following the laws that are in place.
And if this were to keep happening, where in your eyes the administration keeps making moves that are against or illegal, so to speak, is it sustainable then?
Yeah, absolutely. We are committed to protecting the freedoms of Wisconsinites, to protecting the rule of law, to standing up for our democracy, and to stopping unlawful cuts to vital programs from happening. It's made an enormous difference that we've been part of these suits, and I would note that states that are not part of these suits often don't get the protection of these orders. So if you're one of the states that has not joined one of these suits, your residents may not be protected from these unlawful, drastic, and often counterproductive cuts to critical programs.
And I want to ask how this would work. Let's say you continue to hold your position after this next upcoming election, but voters elect a Republican governor. What happens then? What would change?
Well, it would depend on the specific case. It would depend on the legislature as well. One of the critical points is that in Wisconsin, for us to join a multi-state suit under current law, we need approval either from the governor or from one house of the legislature. So Governor Evers has authorized these suits that we have been a part of. If we had a governor who was not willing to stand up to the administration, that would mean that to file those suits, we would need approval from one of the houses of the legislature. So it's a pretty straightforward process as things exist now, but it's possible that could change depending on what happens.
And I want to ask too, because in June, the state Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the Republican-controlled Joint Finance Committee doesn't have the authority to approve settlement agreements made by your department. What did that ruling mean for the DOJ?
Well, that was a really positive step. You know, when I was first elected in 2018, the legislature rushed into a special session to try to take authority away from the governor's office as well as my office, and that is one of the cases we've been involved in that has pushed back against this and protected our ability to resolve cases. What it means is that there are now cases we can resolve more efficiently, that we can move forward without having to go to a legislative committee. And it's helped restore the balance of powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch. I think there's more work to be done on that front, but it's an encouraging, significant step in the right direction. And the fact that it was unanimous shows how blatant a violation of our state constitution the legislature was engaged in.
And you said more work to be done. What would you like to see next?
Well, there's still some types of lawsuits that we don't have clarity on as to when they can be resolved without going to the legislature or not. So I would like to see, hopefully further clarification on those issues. But ultimately making sure that our separation of powers is protected is key, both in the state of Wisconsin and at the federal level.
And I want to move now to, because a big court case today that we're seeing where two Trump attorneys and an aide who worked on the Trump campaign appeared in court related to felony forgery charges that you brought forward. That case has stalled for the fake electors in many other states. Why is it moving forward in Wisconsin, do you think?
Well, it's an ongoing case, so I don't want to comment on the details of this case, but the litigation process takes a long time to play out. Each case has different details in each different state. So we are committed to ensuring that the law is even-handedly enforced and that we are following the facts in the law in this case. I think that approach has been effective, and that's the approach that we take not only with this case, but with every case, and we'll continue to do so.
And one of the defendants today, there were preliminary hearings. One of those was rescheduled. That's kind of seen in some cases as a loss a little bit for your department. What's your reaction to that?
There is always in the course of litigation issues that arise. There are times when different issues need to be addressed. There was a new issue raised today by the lawyers for one of the defendants, and so that issue will be addressed as we move forward. That's all part of the litigation process, is having issues arise, having processes in place for addressing them, and then ultimately having a judge rule on those disputes.
And just to kind of wrap up our conversation, I want to look forward to 2026 really quickly and ask, what are you thinking are some of the big headlines you'd like to see out of next year?
Well, I want to build on the progress that we've been making. On public safety, for instance, we are making important progress, but there's a lot more to do. So I look forward to continuing to fight for funding for crime victim services, or to get long-term funding. This will probably be in 27, but for the Office of School Safety, so that office is in good position for the long term. We have a lot of these pending cases that are still ongoing, and so having good resolutions in those cases is important to protecting the freedoms of Wisconsinites, but also to protecting critical programs. And we've got to keep doing the work we're doing at Wisconsin DOJ to protect people's pocketbooks. You know, I know the president recently said that affordability is a hoax, but the reality is that making sure that we are protecting consumers against fraud and scams is really important. And with the federal government stepping back from those kinds of efforts, the work that we're doing at DOJ is all the more important.